you want to introduce everybody?
Yes, so to you guys in the audience, welcome to our panel discussion. The focus on the top of this panel discussion is actually queer representation in film. And it's kind of resulted as a bit of a trigger from Insects in the Backyard, which is a film that follows this discussion. Just a quick introduction. So we've got Kerry Michael over here, who is the former artistic director of Theatre Royal Stratford East. So he helmed the theatre for 13 years,
Yes.
and he's led the fight on diversity and made great strides and is a proper pioneer of it. I'm Alex Chang. I'm the festival director of TIC Film Festival. We've got Rainer Schulze. Am I?
Yes.
Yes.
Perfect.
Great German. Who is a professor, former professor?
Emeritus professor. Isn't that grand?
I think that's grand. Yeah.
Yeah.
Who is one of our curators of the film festival. And lastly, but not least, we've got Art at the end, who joins us and has a fascinating PhD, which I'm sure you'll enlighten us on soon. So just to kickstart, you've seen the film.
Yes.
So could you give us a little bit of context behind it?
Yes. So Insects in the Backyard is a film of 2010, I believe, by a transgender Thai filmmaker, and it follows a recent kind of spate of Thai movies that have arguably been created very much with a Western audience in mind. So there's a spate of Thai filmmakers that have been creating, I suppose, what we call art house, Cannes ready or Sundance ready films. They don't seem to do very well in Thailand, but they do quite well on the international circuit. Tanya's film is, I would argue, quite deliberately constructed to hit every hot button issue in Thailand. So it's kind of got drugs, it's got prostitution, it's got underage sex, it's got transgenderism, it's got politics in there. A lot of it is done via kind of political allegory. It's not particularly subtle political allegory either. And when the Thai government banned the film, they didn't really give a reason. So with most Thai films that are banned, they suggest that it's a particular scene or a particular shot, and they can go to a very kind of micro, granular level. With this film, they just watched it and they handed it back to Tanya and just said no, no amount of cuts will possibly let this through. A lot of Thai filmmakers have managed to get quite explicit critiques of the Thai state and the Thai government through, simply by dint of, I suppose, obviousness. The political allegories included in the works are just so obvious that the Thai state seems to miss them completely and read the films on a very kind of surface level. But this one is very, very clear what the filmmaker was getting at, and that's why it was completely banned outright. Tanya appealed, resubmitted, and to my understanding, it still hasn't been passed.
And that's from all sorts of festivals around the world, or was it just with?
So it was just banned by
just
time.
banned.
Yeah.
So okay, fine.
But it has been widely exhibited around the world now.
Mm-hmm. So it kind of begs the question as well, from a broader sense, like sensibilities and sort of that transparency of censorship. Because in the East, I think by and large, the Southeast Asian governments or committees and East Asian governments are very transparent in terms of why they censor. But with Insects in particular, to not give tangible reasons. I feel like TIC Film Festival can sort of relate to the other banned films that the council have banned for us. I just wanted to sort of broaden the lens a little bit, taking away from film a little bit, but just like arts in general, and bringing Kerry about queer representation in the arts and how that's changed in your experience as well over the years.
Okay, thank you. I suppose what I know about is British theatre, and I suppose the first good example is how there has been queer representation in theatre and film for 60, 70, 80 years. That's the kind of representation that we've been talking about. So it wasn't until the 56 when a woman called Joan Littlewood put a play on Stage Stratford East stage called A Taste of Honey, where things started to shift. And what that play was a play by a young 19-year-old called Sheena Delaney, who wanted to write, who was watching, who'd been to the RSC, Stratford-upon-Avon, and got bored rigid by it and thought, this doesn't speak to me, I don't understand who these people are, I can't see the representation here. And she wrote her own play about her life and what it was like living in Salford in a working class community. And that play was Taste of Honey. And she sent it to Joan, and Joan, being Joan, put it on immediately. And what that play was about in 1956-57 was a single mum and her daughter, and they were literally jumping from one bedsit to another because they were trying to escape the bailiffs and the credit collectors. The mum was having lots of one-night stands and affairs, and there was also a black lover involved, a black man and a white woman, and the young girl who was the main protagonist, she had a friend called Jeffrey, who, it was never mentioned that he was gay or queer, but he was not the marrying type. Now that would be kind of like bad EastEnders or good EastEnders, depending your opinion on EastEnders. But at the time in '56, it was revolutionary, and then that moved to the screen. And what was interesting about that was it was kind of, from what I understand, one of the first positive experiences of being queer on screen, i.e. you weren't the butt of the jokes, you weren't the prostitute, you weren't the villain, you were a positive character who had a storyline which kind of propelled a positive attitude within the piece. But even then, there was never any explicit reference to the character being gay or even having gay sex. That thing about you're allowed to be queer, but you can't talk about what you do in the bedroom. And that's in our lifetime. But also in terms of censorship, the Lord Chamberlain's office in this country was still prevalent right through the 60s. So right through the 60s, before you were able to put a piece of work on stage, the Lord Chamberlain would have to discuss, would have to clear it and talk about lewd behaviour. More often than not, how you would treat the monarchy or how would you discuss the state would all go through a censorship filter.
Fascinating. And Rainer, I mean, in terms of some of the films that we programmed over the course of a few days, Insects being one of them, do you have any sort of thoughts about queer representation in film that you can shed your light on?
Well, I probably should say something about the film Outed that we will show after Insects. And that shows how important filmmaking is in countries where homosexuality is still illegal, where film is a political weapon. The film was originally done for Uganda, in Uganda, with a Ugandan team. During the time when the anti-homosexuality law had just been passed, which awarded, if that's the right term, the death penalty to male homosexuals caught in the act. This was later annulled by the Supreme Court, but not because they felt it was a human rights violation, but because the procedures of Parliament were not followed. It's still hanging somewhere. This film is based on a real case. It was done on an extremely low budget. I think they had about $6,000 US available. But it is heartfelt, and it shows the atmosphere of being really within a ring of persecution that you can't escape. And it's going on in Uganda. The filmmaker, his home has been raided about half a year ago. All the computers have been confiscated. All the material has been destroyed. So one of the few copies of Outed is actually in my possession because I showed the film at the Bernie Grant's Art Center a couple of years ago, and I didn't delete it from my computer, luckily. And it shows that there is still this battle going on against homosexuality, in particular male homosexuality. But what I think is relevant is that this actually happened in our lifetime in the Western world as well. I grew up in Germany, where of course we have a particular difficult history because of the Pink Triangle, the Nazi persecution of gay men who were thrown into concentration camps and were given very hard labor in order to reform them. So when I grew up, there was still, even though the law was, there was a partial decriminalization similar to England and Wales, in Germany, in West Germany in '69, I still grew up with comments, oh, there are those who Hitler forgot to gas. If you grow up in such an atmosphere and you have no positive examples anywhere, it is something that actually stays with you for life. And that's where film is really important, to show the diversity of LGBTQ, the fluidity, and not putting labels on the various forms of gender expression. What was always acceptable in this country, especially because it was working class, was transvestism, was drag shows. But that was always clear that those, in inverted commas, women on stage were not really women, but were actually men. So it was titillating, but it was acceptable to the working classes here, or the middle classes in Germany. But as soon as it became, for society, more dangerous, it was banned. So as you said, gay men were either criminals, or they were sent to an asylum, or they were killed. They were tragic people who wanted help. Help from what? But yeah, they wanted to be cured. And of course we have this long history of chemical treatment, of castration, both in this country, in the States, and in Germany and elsewhere. And I think with all the pride that we should feel about the advancement of LGBTIQ rights in this country and in other countries, we must not forget that about, I don't know, is it 70, 80, something like that, countries in the world, the situation is still that in particular male homosexuality is criminalized and in some cases punishable by death.
I think what's also interesting is in this country in particular, we've had a huge amount of cross-dressing, gender fluidity in terms of popular art entertainment. So the most popular form here has been a pantomime where you'd have a woman being a man being a woman, or the principal boy, a woman in high leggings, being sort of ambiguous about their gender, and we've had lots of examples of comedy, of light entertainment on television, of very feminine men, and none of that's been a threat because none of it's been sexual or they haven't been sexualized. I think it's always been the moments where you've actually given someone a sexual desire where the danger comes in, which goes back to your point.
Yeah, it does sort of set some sort of theme up here in terms of that binary aspect of where we view things in terms of sexuality and gay, straight, male, female, whatever it is. I had a question. There was a question there somewhere. There was a question, but I mean, like, yes, that was it. So in this country, I feel like, certainly in my young lifetime, I've seen a lot of forward thinking and a lot of steps made in the last few years in particular. Going forwards, do you think it's, this is just a general question across the board, but do you think it's important that predominantly Western countries and the LGBTQ community do view films such as Outed, Insects, from marginalised communities in their own country, in those countries, just to, I don't know if it's a lesson or if it's like a reminder or whatever it is do you feel that's important for that to happen?
I think that's a very interesting question. I mean, I love the fact that in the last kind of 15 years maybe there's been a proliferation of media, stage productions, film, that I've actually, when I've left the theatre, I've left the cinema, I've been joyous about being queer. It's actually made me feel really good. I mean, Love, Simon was a fantastic example recently. I don't know if anyone saw Love, Simon. But actually, media can really instill upon us a sense of who we are, and we respond to the stage or the cinema screen I do think it's important though that we keep our eyes and our cultural sphere open to those cultures where we're not necessarily linked. Because I think there is something about a shared queerness around the world, a sense of discrimination sometimes, that I think it is important that there's a dialogue between East and West, between the Northern and Southern hemispheres. And that's why I think these films are really important for a wider audience.
I think there's also
there's also the sense of the pioneering quality that film can give us. Without being a bit glib about it, but anyone can make a film now with an iPhone and a computer. You can make your own movie, you can cut your own movie. You can say almost what you want to say and then get it up there and distribute it yourself. So there's a democracy in a film which actually you don't quite get in other art forms in terms of other performing arts. There's a sense of actually you are able to do it. It sounds a bit romantic, but in some ways you are able to do it by yourself and then distribute it by yourself. And I think that's where film actually is leading the way in lots of conversations around in terms of breaking down taboos or barriers or having conversations on a global sense that other art forms can't quite do.
But I would kind of doubt that it actually has the impact. I admire your optimism. You are white, I am white.
It's because I'm young. I'm a Cypriot, yes. I'm an olive Cypriot.
So, which still qualifies as Caucasian, I would think. I
wouldn't define myself as Caucasian, but you can define me if you want to.
I would strongly argue that all the advance we have made in recent years is actually for white, middle-class gay men, and that all other minorities have been left out. And that's why I'm surprised you say that you have seen so much progress in recent years. Where is a role model for the Chinese gay community? Or to be even more specific, how about the black Jamaican origin South London estate boy who is gay? There is now a film that was actually funded by, I think it was even by Sky or something, Batty Boy, that tries to actually give some sort of role models for these kinds of minorities, which are basically not represented anywhere. And I think that is the important thing, that we get away from the stereotypical representation of the gay white man who has done extremely well in the recent 10 or 20 years. And I think it is important to have the international solidarity, to be aware where we came from, and that we are only about, 40 years or so ahead of many of those countries who still have those appalling situations, and that we are actually going back at the moment, and that if we are not aware of that, we will be going back. I don't see this as continuous progress that we are witnessing at the moment. I see it, we are actually at a tilting point, and it might very well go back in terms of LGBTIQ rights. So you see this already in Trumpian US. The UKIP, who is very strong in this part of the country, blamed gay men for the drought a couple of years ago. The legalization of same-sex marriage was the reason for the drought. So you have this already, things have become acceptable again. It's this creeping in of prejudices.
No,
to see
very... It's good, because there's a debate going on, and we should open up and hear what other people have to say. I think you're conflating a couple of things, which are about representation per se in culture, and then you're linking queer representation in culture onto that. I think, of course, representation in the British cultural landscape is predominantly white and middle class and privileged, and in all areas people are fighting that and trying to change where the power lies, but also where the centre of excellence lies, i.e. B doesn't always mean to be best, and just because it's got lots of screens doesn't make it a better film than the film that has 2 screens, for example. So there's that thing, but I think there are some really good examples of people who are positive and queer and of colour, who are making movies, who have a voice in the sector. I mean, the obvious one, of course, is Vicky Buda-Blair, who's on a number of really good quality films and has been pioneering in this country queer filmmaking and queer representation for people of colour for the last 30 40 years. Don't want to give his age away. And of course there are always going to be the examples of where things have gone sour, or the bad apple in the cart. But actually we have turned a corner, and I think you know, it's, as you say, you know, 40 years ago, who would have come? 20 years ago, we had the first gay kiss on EastEnders, and the hoo-ha that kicked up. 20 years on, you can't not. Every other character in all those soaps have that queer representation, and everyone. And you could be cynical and say everyone's jumping on the bandwagon because it's in vogue, or it's in mould, or the PC police will be out to get you if you don't have that kind of representation. But actually, I think there's a whole different conversation happening with people in their teens and in their 20s, which has been fueled by the mass communication and the huge amounts of noise which is going globally around identity and queer identity, which actually has changed the world forever, I think.
Yes, I mean, I don't suggest that we are where we were 20 years ago, so don't misunderstand me, but I would still think we are, the main focus also in the mass media is on L and G. And we do forget in particular the T. And if you look at crime figures against transgender people, they are actually on the rise quite horrifically. In the States in particular, in terms of murder, Brazil has the highest murder of transgender people in the world. But also here in Britain, the kind of assaults that transgender people have to endure. So I think I share your pride in what we have achieved. What I'm basically saying is we still need to be on our guard, and the work is not done. And if we look at events like London Pride, it almost looks as these events almost make it appear as if there's nothing more to do.
What I've found with, I mean, interesting that the L and the G is focused upon, is what I've found is that there are lots of demographics now within the LGBT spectrum that are actually very suspicious that there are representations of them in cinema. For example, so trans people will see a trans character and think, well, that person doesn't speak for me. And then this is where these kind of Twitter storms arise, because immediately we now assume that a queer representation has to represent and be the kind of the flag bearer for that demographic. And so I think, as I said, the multiplicity of queer identities that are coming on screen is really exciting because it gives it nuance. It kind of gives the queer lives granularity.
And I also think in terms of young people, whatever we define young to be, as another young person on this panel, what did you say you're a very young person on this panel? I'm quite hurt by that still. Anyway, I digress.
You're hurt.
I think young people are multifaceted, defining themselves. So they are queer, but they also might be of a certain ethnicity, and they also might be of a certain class. And one of those things will lead the conversation, as opposed to their queer identity being the thing that defines them. I think there's a fluidity in how people define themselves now also, which I think is really interesting and possibly very exciting.
I think on that note, we've run out of time. So thank you very much, everyone.